This episode is brought to you by 180 Markets, where it is our goal to bring every individual, fund manager, family office, or any qualified investor access to Australian Stock Exchange capital raises. If you are ever interested in how to access ASX capital raises in a super simple way, 180 Markets is for you. The sign-up process is easy. You just upload your ID, proof of your investor status, and your current brokerage account information. The settlement of shares goes right into your existing account, and you can access our very next capital raise. If you're interested in free, easy access to thousands of ASX capital raises, including placements, IPOs, reverse takeovers, and more, check out 180markets.com.au. Hello, investors. Welcome back to another edition of 18 Minutes with 180 Markets. Friends, we are in the middle today of yet another COVID snap lockdown. We don't know, there's so much uncertainty around it. It is a little bit frustrating. But on a positive, let's turn to a story where we know there is a lot of certainty, and that's towards batteries and the structural battery revolution. And I'm thrilled to announce again, we are joined by Tim Harris, a repeat guest from Redflow. And he's going to talk all about his batteries, his flow batteries specifically, and how much progress they've made and how he is on that structural tailwind. With that introduction, Tim, welcome back to the show.
Great to see you again.
Hey, Tim, for those people that don't know who you are, in just a couple minutes again, can you refresh and tell everyone a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm the managing director of Redflow. I've been in the role a little bit over 3 years. Most of my background has actually been in the telco space. Previous to this role, I was in New Zealand for 3 years with a company called Chorus. And then before that, I spent a decade with British Telecom, with a lot of that time focused on their operations in Asia. One thing that attracted me to Redflow and I think the energy industry is, I think, as you've discussed, Greg, I think the energy and whole market and the ecosystem around the world is facing a once in generation change. And, I think at Redflow, we think we've got a key role around to play of that, particularly in the space of energy storage. But we've clearly got a strong purpose, in terms of the renewable energy world that we want to create in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. And for people that don't know, can you just explain a little bit about Redflow's flow batteries and also how that maybe is complementary or a little bit different than other batteries that people may hear in the AFR every day?
Sure. Well, yeah, so we focused on a category, as you say, Greg, called flow batteries. And we're focused on a particular type of chemistry within that flow batteries, which is called a zinc bromide flow battery. Now, that's a little bit different from normal batteries. When people think of energy storage, they usually think of lead acid or they kind of think of lithium. And we have a couple of different characteristics to those alternative chemistries. For one, we're a battery that actually likes being cycled. We can go up from 100% charge all the way down to 0 and then back up again, and do that happily day in, day out without any degradation. If you do that with a lithium battery, you tend to degrade the battery quite quickly. The second thing is that we don't face what's called any kind of capacity fade. So the more you use it, actually sometimes the better we operate. And we have a number of different other characteristics. We don't have the risk of what's called thermal runaway. So the risk of quite dangerous fires that are rare but do happen in lithium storage systems. We can operate at high temperatures. We have a very good environmental story and credentials. And we can operate at high temperatures up to 50 degrees, so which very much suits us to hot climates such as Australia. And when you start to look at the differences between lithium and flow batteries, we often liken lithium to a sprinter. Very good for grid stabilization, really good for your phone, really good for EVs. We're more like a marathon runner. So when you're wanting reasonably constant power on a regular basis and cycling that battery day in, day out, that's where flow batteries are really well suited. And I suppose we kind of think about the world in the future as it's not an or question, it can be an and question. And increasingly, we're seeing, the uses of lithium for things like grid stabilization and managing your kind of peak and volatility. And then people are using flow batteries for your regular cycling type operations. And look, we're seeing a lot more, I think, recognition of flow batteries and the future ecosystem that we think is very accretive to our business. That's driven, we think, by a number of kind of macro factors. You know, you're getting more and more renewable energy starting to hit the grid, and that's providing some quite significant challenges to grid operators, because sometimes when a lot of that energy is being produced, there's nowhere for it to go. So you're seeing things like negative prices during the day in places like South Australia, but also in places like Europe. And you're seeing issues like curtailment. So you're generating so much renewable energy during the day, it's actually literally got nowhere to go. So that's where kind of medium to longer term energy storage duration is really becoming to the forefront of people's minds. And that's where flow batteries are really well suited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a fair comment to say even 5 years ago, people understood about, selling their excess energy into the grid, but there was no way to really economically capture it. And that's the space that Redflow is playing in. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely accurate. And as you're seeing the price of solar really start to come down, it does make the core economics and the business case for energy storage much, much more attractive. So you're wanting to use energy storage in a number of different ways. Sometimes you wanted to use that energy storage for what you call renewable energy shifting. So that's what we're doing with our project in the US, where we're kind of shifting that energy storage from during the day, and then we're deploying that in the evening between the hours of 4 to 9 p.m. when the prices of energy are really high. Other people are wanting that energy storage for resiliency, and that's a program that we're doing with Optus as part of the government's network hardening program, is provide some of that standby power. So when the grid goes down, they've got sufficient energy storage to power those loads in those really important cell sites in sort of fire sort of high risk areas in Australia.
Yeah, of course. And obviously the fact that someone like an Optus has chosen Redflow is certainly a box tick. Tim, you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago about your US project. Obviously, in calendar 21, one of the big events for Redflow has been your entering into the California market. For those of you that don't know, approximately the 7th biggest economy in the world, about half the United States energy storage, enormous, enormous opportunity. Can you just talk to everyone again a little bit about what's going on in California and also what's happened there maybe over the last 3 to 4 months?
Yeah, so I think back in March, we were delighted to tell your audience about our 2 megawatt hour order with a company called Energia, which is a leading renewable company in North America that's building North America's largest waste to energy plant at a place called Rialto, just outside of Los Angeles. And we were delighted to win that business. It's a 2 megawatt hour system using about 192 of our batteries. But we think it's strategically important for a number of reasons. The first one, it's our largest ever single battery order. So it really reflects growing confidence in our technology and in our system. The second element, that it takes us up to the megawatt hour type size and scale. And we see that we can scale our existing 10 kilowatt hour battery all the way up to megawatt hour, but also operate at the higher voltage range, which is the requirement for the system. So that's also important to demonstrate to the market that we can successfully scale from smaller telco systems all the way up to high voltage megawatt hour type systems. But critically also, it establishes us a really high visibility, a high profile deployment in, as you say, one of the world's largest energy storage markets in California. The energy storage market globally is growing by about 40% a year. The US is about half of that. And inside the US, California represents about half of that US market. So it's an enormous market for us. And we're seeing, because they are very deeply committed legislatively to a renewable energy future, that's driving enormous investment in renewable energies. But critically also, it's also driving new innovations and acceptance of new innovations in energy storage solutions into the market as well. And so this project with Energia has been sponsored by the Californian Energy Commission. I think last year spent about $100 million on key projects. And so we're very excited about our ability to take that project and create some further business in the in California, but also other markets. But we also see some of the things that we've been doing here in Australia actually has a direct relevance into California as well. And we went through our major challenges with the bushfire season in 2020 that led to our program of Optus around bushfire resiliency. California has some of the same exact challenges, though they call it wildfires rather than bushfires. But we were talking to a telco, actually literally earlier on this morning, about some of their requirements and their challenges about keeping further resiliency in their telco towers during this bushfire season. So we see a lot of opportunities in the commercial industrial space like Energia, but also in other markets like telcos where we have some great credentials.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many ways I can go after that that little discussion. But certainly for people that don't know, this is the wildfire season over there, the United States summer, and California, sadly, as beautiful as it is, has tons of wildfires, not to mention earthquakes. So certainly flow batteries are with a lot of ruggedness to them, are incredibly important. Tim, also, one of the things I think we understand the macro now, but getting into Redflow specifically, you really are kicking some goals. There is a lot of evidence on the ground that you are getting a lot of traction. Even as we're filming this morning, I believe you put out an announcement about a request for quote. Can you just talk a little bit about that and about what you're seeing specific to Redflow?
Look, I think back on the announcement of Energia, we faced quite a lot of inquiries about that in the US market, and that's pretty exciting for us. But we're also very cognizant that we're a company that has big ambitions, but we need to allocate our resources selectively. One of the conversations that we've been having over the last 6 months is with a very large corporate in the US that has a very aggressive renewable energy goal. And last week, we announced to the market that we've been included in that end customer's RFI that wants to use our batteries across a very significant number of their operations across the US market. Now, we would emphasize this is just an RFI, but we were actually delighted to be included in it for a couple of reasons. One, we've been named in that RFI. And secondly, that the RFI is clear that lithium has been excluded. So we feel that that's a reflection of 6 months effort. We're at the starting blocks of that engagement, but we're very delighted to be included in that. But we're very excited, and I think that reflects the large macro scale opportunities that markets like the US have for us. And I think you're seeing a couple of other drivers, not only in California, but other markets, other sort of geographies in the US, such as Texas, around things such as we want to find alternatives to lithium. We want to understand, do you have the potential to localize manufacturing in the US, which we do once we've leveraged our existing facility in Thailand. So you put some of those combinations of factors together and things like wildfire resiliency and natural disasters in California and places like Texas. And we think there's a very exciting number of opportunities there for us. We want to, the key goal for us is get that Energia system deployed and installed, and the target to do that is in September of this year, and then really use that as a springboard to expand our presence into the US market. And that's going to mean, building our team there, both in terms of business development resources and also execution resources, but also the need for us. We recognize that we need things like UL certification, which is an important component in table stakes that you need to have to operate successfully in the US market. And so they're the things that we're going to be focused on in the coming months.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Tim, we're getting one of the things, you're in the middle of a capital raise right now, turning to the balance sheet and to the income statement, if you will, the financial statements. One thing I've noticed about you in our time is execution, execution, and execution. You've been outstanding in taking each step programmatically, going forth, a real steward of capital. Can you just talk a little bit about where you stand in the capital raise and what is needed to take Redflow to the next level, if you will?
Look, I think when we last talked, Greg, and we've talked over a little while now, we emphasise, we think, the need for Redflow to build really strong foundations for growth. And I think when we came on board, we recognised a fantastic technology, but some of those foundations that we thought were necessary to achieve our opportunity needed to be strengthened. And they were things just in terms of some of the manufacturing capability in Thailand that I think we've very much bettered down. And I think that model and the flexibility that we have with that Thailand model has actually served us extremely well through the COVID period, and now in a period where growth at now. It's meant that we've need to be focused in terms of the applications and our value proposition to a certain amount of customers, whether that be in telco or the commercial and industrial space, but also being very clear, I think, about what entails with a flow battery versus lithium, and starting to make that story very clear. And so building on those foundations, I think you're seeing things like Optus and Energia, the reflection of those foundations that we've been able to build, and the confidence of some of these large blue chip customers that they have in terms of our technology and our company. And that's an amount of some significant work. I think the key opportunity for us is start to build on that. Start to build, because we see tremendous opportunities for us in California, here in Australia, and in other markets. And I think the reason that we've gone to kind of search for some growth capital now is that we think the time for us is start to leverage those foundations, that momentum that we've created from some of those contracts as soon as we possibly can. And so we think the next 12 months are going to be particularly exciting for us. We see some really strong opportunities for us to target the market. And critically, I think we're now talking to customers that really are now starting to appreciate the potential role of flow batteries and the differentiation that we have versus other chemistries.
Yeah, is it fair to say, Tim, that the conversations you're having now, the reality is 18 months ago, you just couldn't have even gotten in the door with them?
Look, I think that's to some extent. I mean, I was talking to someone earlier on today, with a new technology, even though we've been around for 10 years, no one really wants to be the first to be the guinea pig. And look, now we've got over 130 deployments around the world, which gives us a great depth and breadth in terms of experience of operating the battery, not in the lab, but in the field. And that's built a lot of knowledge and inherent understanding from us about how the battery best operates and how we can best optimize the performance of the battery in the eyes of the customer. And so that gives us a great strength, we think, to say, look, any type of, whether it's a childcare centre or a telco or a CNI customer, we can point to some of these deployments and say, look how the battery's operating in the real world, rather than just kind of looking at a battery in a lab. And I think that gives us great credibility, I think, and relevance to our customers as they're starting to think about flow batteries and saying, right, well, we can point to some of those deployments and see the battery actually working in anger and generating the benefits that we say it can.
Yeah, and also, Tim, and maybe this is getting a little bit more technical, one specific about your product. If I'm a customer and I'm a large customer, typically large customers, they still want to start out with some type of pilot program, if you will. But in your case, correct me if I'm wrong, you can connect different batteries together to expand as the customer expands. Is that accurate?
That's absolutely true. So whether it's in the telco space, where for some of these sites, for Optus, we're rolling out 2 batteries. For these sites, we can expand that to 3 if they need to kind of upgrade their electronics and therefore power requirements as 5G or something like that comes along. Similar to what we're doing in the commercial and industrial space with people like Energia. The building blocks that we've got there with our new Energy Pod Z, we can actually replicate those depending on what the customer wants. So that Energy Pod Z is a 160 kilowatt hour system, so it contains 16 of our batteries. But that's really going to be the core building block for our approach into larger systems. So whether it's 1 megawatt hour, 2 megawatt hours, 20 megawatt hours, we can use exactly the same model for us to grow and expand depending on what the customer requirements are. And that's very exciting for us. And that's why we feel that not only is Energia important for us in a US and California market context, but it's also demonstrating our scalability from our existing 10 kilowatt hour system up to megawatt hour, and seeing how that system can work and perform as we've told customers it can.
Yeah, of course. And I could also see, putting on the other side, if I'm a big customer, it really de-risks doing business with Redflow, in the sense of we can try it, we can see how it's progressing, and then add and add and add, as opposed to some other products where you just have to either go all or nothing, so to speak.
Yeah, and look, this is interesting, really. This is one of the conversations we're often having with customers when they're starting to talk about big scale, and you often get the question, why don't you guys just build a bigger battery, a big tank and a big stack, etc. We've gone down the route where we believe that small is beautiful, and we think that's justified for a couple of reasons. The first reason is it provides resiliency. So in a bank of 192 batteries that we're doing for Energia, if one of those batteries is not looking as good as we want it to, we can take that battery offline and do some remote diagnosis through our remote battery management system and do any orchestration without disturbing the rest of the system. So your risk of that is minimized through that kind of smaller approach. The second thing that we think why we think small is actually the right form factor for us as we scale into bigger systems is that we think that we can introduce automation in terms of our manufacturing and therefore driving down the cost and increasing productivity much sooner with a small battery versus a large battery. Often some other flow batteries are very large, they're quite bespoke, and the ability to introduce automation into that manufacturing is much more challenging than our battery today. And we very much see opportunities for us as we bring in new techniques around things such as manufacturing with our tank and bringing in injection molding into a tank rather than rotor molding. That has a direct bottom line impact in terms of the cost of lowering the cost of that input into our production. Now, that means that we can be both competitive in the market and we can drive some further margin into our business.
Fantastic. Hey, Tim, we have to keep these interviews short. As you know, you've really, backshotted what you've done, foreshadowed what you're going to do. Do you have any closing remarks for the audience?
Oh, look, I think, we think it's an exciting time for us. As we said before, Greg, we've been busy, I think, over the last couple of years, establishing those foundations for growth and I think bunkering down during the time of COVID, where it was kind of particularly uncertain, especially with some of our markets that we were focusing on, like South Africa. I think we've successfully pivoted and started to focus on some of those high growth markets. We've leveraged some of those investments that we've made and those foundations for growth. And I think at the same time, we think the market is maturing and starting to focus on medium to longer term energy storage duration solutions, which flow batteries and Redflow is very well positioned for.
Fantastic. Tim, thank you very much. And we look forward to the future with you.
Thanks. Take care, everyone out there.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you for watching another presentation by 180 Markets. Don't forget, if you want access to thousands of ASX capital raises, head on over to 180markets.com.au, sign up, and get on board for our very next capital raise. Thanks for watching.